Yeah, I was gonna wait.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
Such a wallflower.
She just got home.
I was that.
They had to bring it. Yeah, except Becky needed to be doing a little more focus, I guess. So they realized he had been struggling with something and could have been helping him. I was doing nothing. He had all his other homework done.
You know, obviously, somebody probably didn't want it. Yeah.
Well, that, and he forgot it.
I mean, even that.
I mean, think about that. What do you want me to do?
Still hold out. We have in the room.
Teacher said, notes home in here. They just said, hey, kids should be done for a year. They're not keeping the service at home.
How are you? We gotta get that. Today is just, so yeah.
Practice that now.
It's like a little vaccine.
I'm trying to do this.
I tried, I was over there.
Really?
Yes. You were over here?
No, I was sitting right there.
Oh, I mean, on the table.
I might agree with that, just one. Oh, we need.
Is there a reason, you have a reason for it? I don't. Specifically.
Yeah, I think
So
so.
it came out exactly like that. The chills, the shapes.
That's expensive. We're not gonna have that.
And I slipped over.
We don't agree anyhow, so. I was trying to give you an hour, Karen.
And I'm not fast enough.
We were just speculating who the person was.
Don't sit there and
Or
look
Doug
at your
sitting
little
by
road
himself.
survey with camera.
I didn't think.
I didn't think so. I have to sit by myself.
Yeah.
You know,
Next year.
I had to move, I was bad.
what?
I had to move, I was bad.
It's okay to see her?
Yeah.
Come on, guys, you got it.
Yeah, and then they played it out.
Sure. No, I'll figure it out.
I don't know.
You already ate?
I did, we had.
Yeah, I had thought it was how, you know, pointed out. Okay.
That's Dan.
Meeting's gonna last a minute from everything, eh?
Oh.
You got all taped up next?
Get out of here before it's light.
Oh, the camera's on. Dan.
I hope I'm
How's our
back.
girl and early grandson? Good.
Just looking at
Probably some food or Good.
She went to Kalahari. She's right there.
You still going once a month?
Just about.
Good.
Now I want to just go in. So what's the
Gotta like that.
Early morning.
Is that time period?
Gotta get your wits about you first thing.
Get in by 9-ish.
Yeah, but Saturdays are better.
Situated.
Yeah, well, the best days are Tuesday. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, down, either down to Charleston or to Kansas. So,
Yeah, it's a little rough right now. It's something I will not sensitive. We're figuring it out. Previous house next, right? They have a great relationship. So they have somebody in my son's better than clubs. So separated the same. So I said right now it's not very little of the sun. You guys aren't here and it's starting to from us. I said that's only really
They got the software up and running for the boiler now. And now that we have the software up and running for the boiler, now it's telling us we need an actuator, a valve, this thing. So $1,300 later, now I'll know what the boiler is running and stuff.
Good. Yeah, because I was in, like, the Teresa's office in the back.
Yeah.
Normally, I think like sweat pipes.
Yes.
That's freezing. Now it's like, must be like 50 degrees in there.
Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. Have a rather dreary evening, and I know with the change of plans, it ended up not being good for some people, but maybe, I don't know, maybe good one or two of you here who couldn't be here the last time, and I'm glad you're here. So I'm going to open with a word of prayer, I guess a word of grace for those who are eating, including myself, and then I'm going to let Kelly Brown, do you all remember Kelly Brown? Some of you have met him, maybe some of you haven't, from our conference office, and he can introduce himself fully, and then we can enjoy and be challenged by what he has to say. All right, let's pray. Oh, great God, Lord our God, we come before you here in this place this evening, and we are ready to tackle, Lord, yet another workshop, our last official one. Lord, you have been with us as we have been journeying through these months of the Healthy Church Initiative. And there have been challenges and there have been slow ups, but yet, Lord, we have felt your presence moving us, challenging us, and may your presence continue to do so this evening as we are gathered for this workshop. So, Lord, open our hearts, open our minds to your presence, to your spirit, to the information and the challenge that Kelly will share with us. And Lord, we also pray your blessing upon all of us who are eating. Bless the food and strengthen us today and always to your service. In Christ's name, amen.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for allowing me to reschedule the last time. I was dealing with cold sickness, so wasn't able to get out and get here. But between now and 10 o'clock when we're done, hopefully we'll have covered the introductory ground that will build on what you've read in Winning on Purpose, but also then give you some tools, some nuts and bolts about how to move towards simple governance and or a single board model of leadership. Does it sound all right? So before we have 3 handouts that hopefully everybody eventually gets the 3 handouts. But before we get to those, just want to review and then put some information on the board. The mission of the church is to do what?
Make disciples.
Make disciples. Right. So, if anything we do, if we are not making disciples, it's not getting us to the outcome that we were created to do, right? If we aren't making disciples, we are not going to be able to make the style of change that the simple governance will require. So it's important to make sure that whatever you're doing to help people grow in their journey of discipleship, to grow closer to God and closer to others every day, whatever you're doing there, to make sure that you're really doing it as best as you possibly could do at this time, right? Because if that's not working well, this kind of shift will be a lot harder, if it may even not be possible to do this kind of shift, okay? And you'll see why here in a moment. So one of the things that simple governance attempts to do is separate policy from procedure, okay? So the easiest way to explain that is who writes, in most churches, who writes the building use policy? Trustees. In most churches, who's in charge of enforcing the building use policy? Trustees. So you see they are doing both policy and procedure. And so through simple governance, what you hope to do is separate policy out, and you create a policy governance board that essentially draws a playing field, and then everybody else has the permission to do whatever they want. Just stay on the playing field and don't go out of bounds. Okay? Does everybody understand that analogy? So in the life of the church, we have, in the life of a United Methodist Church, I'd say, we have some things that are required. Can anybody name those for me? What? Okay, a pastor. What else do we have that's required in a United Methodist Church? Huh? Staff. Okay, that could be paid or unpaid, right? There are certain staff positions. We'll get to those in a minute. What else is required in the United Methodist Church?
Lay leadership.
Okay, lay leadership in what areas?
Trustees.
Okay. Lay leadership as trustees. You also need a lay leader, right? Put that up here too. But what other areas do you need lay leadership in?
Staff parish relations.
Staff parish relations committee.
Worship.
Worship. We over here under a ministry team area. Okay.
Oh, come on, finance, jeez.
Finance. There we go. What else? Education. Okay.
Music.
Music might be one over here, yes.
Committee on nominations.
Nominations or lay leadership. Okay. What else?
Fellowship.
Fellowship events. Different age groups, but fellowship.
Education.
We have education there. So, and that's education of all ages, right? From children all the way through adults.
Some kind of board or council.
Okay, a board or council. plus your lay leader, plus your annual conference delegate.
9 plus 2 lay leader, 2. It'll be 3 because we now get 2.
So
So
12 people.
let's see, 11.
Finance? How many people on finance?
Too many. I mean,
Get your treasurer, your financial secretary.
those are the same. So, say 9.
We have 9 members, then plus treasurer, plus finance secretary, but she doesn't have.
So 10.
10 trustee chairs.
I don't know if I count all the people that are ex officio.
Well, we got an idea. How about nominations? That's your role, Pastor Lawson.
Ideally, there should be 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay. So we got 22 and 18, that's 30, 40 people in these positions alone. How many people do you worship on a Sunday morning?
40.
There's an overlap.
There might be some overlap, but I'm just giving you an idea of how many people out of your worshiping congregation are just involved in the administrative committees of the church.
Hey, Kelly, if we were in this model though, would we need that many people? I would think we would need more than that.
That's where we're going to go to.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And then you also have people involved in these ministry team areas, right? Do you nominate a worship committee? Okay, so you have people opt in based on their interests? Okay. So the number there and how long they stay could vary depending on the worship team. So our hope is to be able to move to a system where we decrease the number of people here, right? We still make sure these things are taken care of because we have to be growing disciples. And we still allow it to be a safe and effective system for decision making. That's where we hope to go to. Does that sound possible? Okay. Good. So let's, there was a handout. Mine's all wet, but it looks like this here with the people rowing together. I can use this one, sure. Yeah. So it starts out refocusing on mission, vision, and value. So one of the other things that happens when we have this kind of setup in a church is that the structure begins to drive the vision. And the vision isn't driving the structure, right? So you have so many positions that you fill that becomes, oh, how are we going to get enough people to fill these positions? More than, are we actually doing what we need to be doing to be about making disciples? Now, what positions do we need to fill? Okay, so hopefully this kind of shift can help you stay focused on mission and vision and not focused on structure. All right, so if you turn to the first page, it says why. Vital congregations are characterized by radical hospitality, passionate worship, missional focus, intentional discipling, extravagant generosity, and flat and simple structure and effective leadership practices. You can Google church structures or church structure or church flow chart, and you get all of these pictures like the one there on the right. Now I know you can't see all the details because it's small, but does it look easy to understand? It doesn't. You see on the left there, you got a lot of lines leading to a lot of other lines, leading to boxes. And, just if you had a question or you had a decision that needed to be made, where do I start? And then how long does it take me to get through that whole thing till we get the decision made, right? It's cumbersome. And it doesn't allow us to really often be focused on those 5 areas that are listed there. but instead we're focused on how do we get this through the process that it needs to go through. This says Shady Grove United Methodist Church. This is actually a United Methodist Church structure diagram. So yours may be a little different, but it may
Ours is simpler than this.
simpler. Good. So if you go to the next page, you've already read about this and we talked about it before, I know. But effective leaders, effective congregations align responsibility with authority and accountability. Have you heard that before? Those three words? Was it in the book that some of you read?
We do this at work.
Okay. Good. He's your new leader if he does it at work. He knows how to do this. So what is the desired outcome? This is important, and if there's another book that you all want to invest in reading, it's called The Math of Mission. And it really helps us to move our focus from outputs to outcome. And that's what we're talking about, is answering this question. What is the difference this is going to make? All right? So we can say we want to provide groceries to families in need. And we can do that. And every Wednesday we can give away free groceries. And we can count the output of how many groceries we give away and how many families we give them to. But have we really measured leadership. It's important to know what we are holding people accountable to. We are holding them accountable to what? The outcome, the vision. What are we not holding them accountable to? What?
Output.
Output would be a good one, yes. What else aren't we holding them accountable to? So we're not holding them accountable to certain numbers, counting of certain things. What else don't we hold them accountable to? The preferences and desires of people in the church. If those preferences and desires take us outside of our outcomes, take us outside of our vision, we're not holding them to accountable to whether somebody is happy about the decision that's been made. Right? They're being held accountable to what? The purpose and the vision, the outcome. That's a hard one, isn't it? For when there's somebody who's attended here 50 years and they come up and say, why did you make that decision? You know there's 10 people in this congregation that don't like that decision, and they'll probably leave because you did that. Right? That's hard. But again, if you're going to move to this model, we have to be clear about where the accountability lies. It doesn't lie in preferences, desires of people in the church, but it lies in the commonly held vision and outcome that the church has defined. Okay? Now, there are times where I don't want to make it seem like preferences, desires are bad things, but when they take us away from that vision that God has called us to be a part of, that purpose, that outcome that God has put before us, then we have to call those into question, right? And so we have to make sure that we're staying focused on that vision and not allowing things to pull us away from that. Okay? So, effective leadership, practice accountability. How do we make sure we are actually doing what Jesus expects us to do? What are the results intended from each ministry? How will we know if we have faithfully fulfilled a ministry purpose? And so that gets us to that strategic planning, that where, through prayer, through study, where is God calling us to make a difference in this community and in the lives of people? And that's what we stay focused on. So I was just at a meeting with a church a couple weeks ago, and a new pastor there, and it's an old downtown church, and around them there's a lot of poverty. And he has, just since he's been there in July, just engaged the church, whoever will go with him. They walk through neighborhoods and community and around the community, around the city, to prayer walk and to see where God might be leading them to. And they have determined that what God is leading them to is to be an advocate for affordable housing in their area. And that's a huge step for that church. So that's the outcome. That's what they believe God is calling them to make a difference in their community. And that's what they're going to plan around. That's what they're going to hold each other accountable to. Okay? Now, they can't do that unless they're doing what first? Growing disciples, right? So it comes back. Yeah, it comes back to discipleship. So they have to be growing disciples. Yeah. So they can do that. All right? That's accountability. Questions on those three things? Authority, responsibility, and accountability working together. So the last page I think we're on is a summary.
Kelly, you talk about those as though they're kind of separate things. Aren't those really related? I mean, would people seeing a church that had a mission and was actually doing it lead to more disciples?
Yeah. Yes, I think you're right, because if you are focused on doing those things, the discipleship is going to be there. But often churches kind of forget about that discipleship piece and they only focus on other things, and then the discipleship begins to fall away, and then they lose the capacity to live into the outcome that they see.
So that creates two really important things that need to be worked on, so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
kind of fragmenting the efforts.
Yeah. So this is my, see, I think I just finished my 8th year in this position. And when I first started, I struggled, is it vision that leads to discipleship or discipleship that leads to vision? I think it's discipleship that leads to vision. I think you've got to grow disciples first before you can get a hold of that vision. So that's why I say if you're not doing that well now, that's where you really need to focus your efforts. Because without growing disciples, you can't grow vision. You can't communicate vision. You can't live into vision. So, all right. So the last one about this is, it says, how do we protect the body from malicious or mistaken leadership? What are the boundaries, values, standards, limits required? There could be a couple ways that happens, but right, you have to be comfortable with willing to giving somebody space to live out the ministry that they're called to do.
You gotta have strong leaders. You gotta have people who can make decisions. Sometimes you're not gonna find that in a church.
Which there's a wonderful new book out called Church Ecology, which is all about developing leaders in your local congregation. You should get it. The author will even autograph it for you. If you want to buy them from me, I'll give them to you cheaper than you can get them on. But you're right, and that's one of the things that we point out in our book is that churches often don't take the time to do leadership development to make sure you have a pipeline of leaders that can live into this kind of structure. They usually assume it might happen or hope it happens, but if you aren't growing those leaders, growing the disciples that grow into those leaders, you won't be able to maintain this kind of and live into this. Anything else before we move on? So as we move to a new structure, we want it to be a flat structure. If you remember the diagram from the first page, it's not flat, right? It's a big square. You want to flatten that structure, and you want to take out the steps that are needed for somebody to be able to work through that structure. So on the next page, you see an example of a structure. All church meeting, church council, then you see the administrative committees, and then off of administrative areas, you see ministry teams, right? That looks like it might be pretty good, but actually you can go even a little simpler and flatter with that. Because here there's a lot of steps. If you are a mission trip, you've got to go through a lot of steps to have a decision made around your mission trip, right? So there is one more way to go with that. Let me see here if that's on the next page. Yeah. If you go to the next page, you can see flat and simple. So you have your all-church meeting. You have four things. Your all-church meeting, your church council, your pastor, your ministry teams. So what did we draw here? The only thing we don't have is your all-church meeting, right? You have your church council, pastor, staff, ministry teams. Okay? So that flattens the structure greatly, doesn't it? A lot more simple. So who do the ministry teams have to go to if they need to help them with resourcing or questions? Who do they go to? Pastor. Right? And the pastor also will instruct ministry team leaders on what? Here's the playing field. Here's the outcome for all of your ministry areas. This is what you should be working towards. This is how we're going to measure it. And they help them stay on track with those things. Now, the pastor then, who do they also connect with? The church council. The church council helps to make sure, pastor, do the ministry teams have the resources they need to do the ministries that we are asking them to do? Right? Pastor isn't taking things to church council to get approval. Why? Because it's already been done, because the playing field's already been drawn. What the pastor is doing is making sure that church council can be aware of any barriers that are out there that are keeping the ministry teams from doing the work they need to do. Okay? The church council then, what are they doing? They are living out what the all-church meeting has said this is the direction that we are moving as a congregation. Okay? So the all-church meeting setting those boundaries, church councils affirming those, assigning resources. The pastor then is the go-between in between those ministry teams and the church council to make sure in the day-to-day decision-making we are living that out.
Could you explain a little more what the all-church meeting does?
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah.
Because we don't have those.
I
No.
know, yeah, my feeling exactly is that,
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get to those, what those are.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, questions about how that can look, how you can flatten that, you can shorten the decision-making process, you can still enable safe and effective and fruitful ministry, right? Responsibility, authority, accountability lives throughout this process. Now, where people will have a question is they'll say, but you have so few people making decisions. Well, that's not true, because at the beginning, the whole church is making the decision. It's just not that everybody is living out the day-to-day decisions, right? So you have that accountability.
Yeah, okay, so I got a question for you. Okay. So I'm looking at your flat thing here. So we're gonna take trustees, we're gonna take finance, we're gonna take staff parish, and we're gonna throw them all in this every ministry thing?
No, they're going to be in the church council piece.
Okay.
Let's see. Over here.
Okay.
So it kind of will look like this.
All right, so we're gonna blend all those just into one guy?
So, in theory, what it would look like is these four, and we'll go into more detail, will be the same 9 people. And we'll go into more what that looks like, but that's how you would cut that number down.
Those are the people who missed the all church meeting.
Yeah, that's right. They miss the old church meeting, so they're not.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
We don't need all these committees.
Right, so these 9 people are your trustees, these 9 people are your SPRC, these 9 people are your finance, these 9 people are your nominations. 9 people doing all those jobs. Now, you gotta go a little deeper with how it can actually live out. So, for example, trustees, in every church I ever served, trustees did all the little projects around the church. Well, these 9 people may or may not be able to do that. So what do? You gotta make a way for those projects to get done if these 9 people aren't gonna do it. So what do you do? How do you find the people that are willing to do painting and landscaping and those kind of things around the church? So, but that can be done easily. So, all right. Other questions?
Are you sort of saying that this goes from left to right as far as,
Yes.
I thought, I haven't read the book, I thought the pastor was the center.
Yes.
Communicated always,
Yeah, that's why I kind of drew it like this with the pastor in the middle.
but
Well, we're going to go through these 4, and I think you'll see why this is drawn this way. But the pastor is the middle, the go-between of all of this. The pastor is the middle of that house.
the pastor makes the decisions though.
The pastor lives out the decisions that first the all-church meeting makes, and that in some ways the church council makes. The pastor lives those out with the ministry teams. We'll get into it a little deeper. And if you saw the same question, bring it up again.
I don't remember in the book, the all church meeting part.
That is a special thing that I had, and a special thing. It really relates more to the Methodist setting.
Okay.
That we have that there. So in some places you may have used to refer to that as a church conference or a church conference, but we have a way to do it a little differently. So yeah.
So in essence, the council is 9 people.
Well, 9 people, but you may want to add your lay leader. You know, it can be more than that, but you take care of these 4 committees. You know, you whatever you need to take care of these 4 committees is a number of people there. So it could be 6 people, right? It could be 12 people. You guys have to decide how many people you need to make up those 4 committees. But then you can also add, like I said, lay leader, UMW president. There could be other things. You just don't want this to be 40 people. I've seen some churches have 40 people on their church council, and it's just, you can't get anything done that way. So,
But their responsibilities changed as well.
yes, which we're going to walk through. If you go to the next page, simple governance model, 4 layers. We will walk through those. So layer number 1 is church conference or all church meeting. Layer 2 is church council, which includes leadership and nominations as well. Layer 3 is staff. Layer 4 is ministry teams. We'll walk through each of those, adding some things in there as we go. So we should have numbered these pages also. So the charge conference, the responsibility is for the charge conference is to the mission of the United Methodist Church, and the mission is to make disciples, right? Okay. The authority is that the charge conference speaks for the whole congregation. So I may seem like a Methodist nerd in this way, but I think in recent years we've lost sight of the power of the charge conference. We've minimized it. And I hear so many pastors and churches that say, yeah, we're having our charge conference. We're doing it with 6 other churches, and maybe 2 people show up from our church. Well, now you've lost the power of that visioning that can happen in a charge conference. I remember growing up in the church, how everybody got together in the fellowship hall. And we went through all this stuff, no matter what age you were, about where the church was moving together. Now, if your district superintendent doesn't have a single charge conference with your church, that doesn't mean you can't have some style of meeting once a year that sets the vision and the course of the church moving forward. In fact, it might even be better to not do it in the charge conference setting, but do it in a way that you can make it exciting, that you can energize it, that you can get people really wanting to be a part of the mission and the vision that you're moving forward with. Okay? So that's what it could fill as your charge conference thing, but this is a once-a-year meeting where all members are invited. You get together and you set the course of the congregation for at least the next year. What are the outcomes that we're focused on in these ministry areas? And we live into those. That's going to tell us the difference we're going to make, and we're going to measure it this way. We've got these resources, and you really put all that out there for everybody. Okay, so that's that all church meeting, which is the first part. Okay, that's the whole church. It speaks for the whole church. And everybody's a part of that. Some churches I know that do that call it like a vision day. Rick, have you heard churches use any other?
Vision Day is pretty much what we use on a regular basis.
Yeah. So after you have your vision day, then that vision, all that stuff that's decided on that all church meeting day falls into the lap of church council. And now church council figures out what resources we have, what resources we need, all those things to live into that vision that's shared on that day. So they give you an example here of a church council that's 13 members. There's ways you can design that. So you figure out what works best for you. The only thing that's required is you need to have some way to say we have these 4 committees represented. It's the only thing you got to make sure you have there. Okay. So the church council tends the vision of the congregation throughout the year. In between the large all church meetings, the church council tends that all year. They look at budget, personnel, major strategies. Again, the accountability is to the mission of the United Methodist Church. The church council meets in 4 regular meetings annually. Okay, plus they hold annual all church meetings. Plus they might, or they probably would lead town hall discussions, focus groups, other listening settings as needed to remain in touch with the congregation. So one church I know that does this model, they have their 4 meetings of church council, but in between those they have town hall meetings. And so after worship on a certain Sunday every month, whoever wants to stay after worship, they have a meeting. They talk about decisions that have made, why those decisions were made, and what that means to them as they're living into their vision. It's an informational session, but it's a way to communicate with more people than just those on church council. Okay, so that's what the town hall meeting is. So if you, I gave out another handout. Annual agenda for single boards. This is a detailed agenda example of the 4 meetings that your church council has throughout the year. So if you turn the page over in your packet, first of all, it says first meeting is looking up, leadership development, orientation to mission, vision, values, policy review. Second meeting, looking back, evaluating past year relative to established goals. Third meeting, looking ahead, assessing current capacities and challenges in the congregation and the mission field. Fourth meeting, looking forward, establishing major ministry focus for the coming years. Then you have your annual church meeting. You celebrate the past accomplishments. You confirm vision and goals and leaders. And then you have occasional listening with town hall meetings and so forth. So this example agenda for all those meetings is here. These are designed in a like a half a Saturday, like a 3-hour meeting on a Saturday, more like a retreat style. So that's what these are designed. You may not do it in that exact fashion, but this is an example to give you of what those 4 meetings could look like. Rick, I know you has shared with some churches. Go ahead and share what how you talk about churches building this into smaller meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, often what we do, one of the terminologies we use with this, if you look at the advantages of focused on the mission and vision and what the outcome will be. It keeps us focused on the fiduciary issues that we have to make sure that that our budget is still on track. If it needs some adjustments in one way or another in order to live into our mission, if it needs some adjustments because of giving or lack thereof or whatever it is, we can adjust all those things. We can look at all those things on that basis, and we can oversee if we're really headed where we wanted to head. And if not, do we need to change our goal, or were we out of bounds with what we were thinking, or has something changed in the community around us that needs have come up that we didn't recognize and opportunities exist? So do we need to adjust some of that? And we have the conversation with the pastor on how we're being led in these areas and the benchmarks that we're meeting or not meeting, or whatever the case may be, and how we can best support that to go forward. But we're governing these things and we're not managing these things. What we find is that when churches meet every month, if boards are meeting every month, there's not enough governing to do, so we automatically start managing how we're doing what it is that we want it done. And that happens too once you start meeting bi-monthly over a period of time and you get that in your routine. You realize it won't be long that you're going to a quarterly meeting for that.
So there are ways.
recommendation is an annual.
Right, yeah.
Who runs it?
That would be run by the church council.
And who on the church council?
Well, you all as a church council would decide what you're gonna talk about, what you'll share, and then based on that, people would figure out who would be leading the meeting.
So not the pastor.
The pastor would be a part of it, yeah.
I think that's gonna be easy. We're doing that now. Okay, excuse me. I'm one of the trustees, I'm the head trustee, I have been for quite some time. We're doing things kind of like this already, because this is how I work. On my own profit center at work,
Yeah.
on my own profit center with the trustees, we need something that gets done, and then I go to the committee, and they do what I tell them to do.
Yeah.
Pretty much is how it works. I'm not trying to blow smoke or whatever, but we need a new soundboard, we need cables, we need to do this, we need to do that. We're gonna get it done. I'm a big fan of get it done, because we don't need to worry about, like you said, the management, we need to worry about our vision. We don't need to stress over the carpet cleaner.
I think though, Dan, the visioning part's gonna be very hard for us, because we don't have a vision right now.
Yeah.
And that's something we're just not familiar with. That's gonna be tough for us to learn how to do that.
I'm more nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
I'm not the vision guy, I'm the nuts and bolts guy.
Yeah.
We can help you with that.
And we have been working on a vision, a statement has been disseminated, we're still working on it, we're hoping to approve it in the next.
But Kelly gave the example of this inner city church where they have a very concrete vision to find a way to support affordable housing.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we've come up with something that's that concrete.
Well, there's some concrete things in this new vision statement we're working on.
What's the top one? Just curious.
Well, it's a couple pages long.
No, I'm just wondering what one big thing though is that is gonna be part of our vision. I'm just kind of curious.
I think the vision should be like pretty short. I mean, I don't think it needs to be like 2 pages long. It needs to be something that everybody's gonna remember, and something that's gonna be something that is,
But we have the simple, we're starting with, our simple vision, but then we are elaborating, because if you don't give details, it doesn't say anything.
Yeah,
So
so-
we're actually saying,
Kind of the outcomes.
yeah, we're planning on this outcome, we're looking for this outcome and this outcome.
Right, so your vision that you share with everybody is know, grow, go, right? We want to know Christ, we want to grow in Christ, we want to go in Christ. But you have a strategy underneath of that about how you're going to live into those 3 words. That's all a vision, because that's all the picture of who you're becoming together, and that's what compels you and drives your decisions. But yet you use those 3 words to create, so people can know.
And ours is faith, hope, and love.
Yeah.
It's a vision slogan that helps identify, that the entire vision lives into, or lives out of.
I thought the story you shared about doing prayer walks in the neighborhood and asking for guidance and what their big thing was neat.
Yeah.
I would love to see us do that.
Yeah.
But it's probably a little easier said than done.
Yeah. And
Well,
you
we
might get to-
tried for several months, and people didn't show up.
Well, I mean, our mission then wasn't necessarily to come up with it, but you're right. It was a simple thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways to. So as you work into this faith, hope, and love, and some of that strategy, some of those things that you're talking about might become clearer, because now you're focused on being a church of faith, hope, and love. And as you focus on that, that's going to take you here, here, here. So it might become clearer as you live into that.
Well, and the other thing that I see is it might feel clunky right now because of our structure. And if we adopt this kind of structure and format, hopefully we see more engagement from the overall congregation. And then over time, it might help refine more of that vision as we go along, because more people are thinking about it and in tune with it.
Yeah, all these pieces fit together, hopefully, for you to live into a new health as a congregation. So, well, let's keep looking here. These are good questions. We're going to keep asking those. So anytime you have a question here, raise your hand. We look then now, we've looked at the all-church meeting, the church council. Now we'll look at the pastor and or staff. Okay? Pastor is chief of staff. Now, what does that mean? The pastor does not have authority in our system to hire and fire, right? Who has that authority? Staff Parish Relations. But what could the pastor have authority if there are other paid staff to do? Annual evaluations, right? Hold them accountable to goals and things like that they may be working towards in their ministry area. The weekly staff meetings. So the pastor is going to be the one that's going to have the most interaction, most connection with a staff person for the management kind of style of things, right? So that's why it says they're chief of staff. Okay? And the staff includes not only paid people, but as it says here, ministry team leaders. So when there's a staff meeting called, it's the pastor, it's other paid staff, plus your worship team leader, your education team leader, right? All of those people are considered staff in this setting. Why? Because they have oversight over a major ministry that's part of the vision and the outcome of the church. Okay? So, looking at responsibility, the staff's responsibility is to nurture and align the ministries of the church toward fulfillment of the vision. The authority the staff has is personnel, financial, and strategic authority is delegated by the council to fulfill the vision and major goals. Go do it. Pastors are one interacting with them, making sure they're staying in the playing field, making sure they're not abusing or misusing resources, all those things. And the pastor is the one then conversing with church council to make sure we're moving in the right direction. You see how it fits together? Okay. All right, let's move on to, did we get them all? All church meeting. Did I miss the
Committee on Nominations.
Committee on Nominations, Leadership Development? And that would really, in most cases, would fall into the church council work. Okay. It's kind of listed separate here, but I've always seen it work best as it kind of falls into this work here. So you may have some people that you assign to do some specific leadership development events, but the nominations, I think, can work through this situation here. So, but the pastor would be leading in that.
So the council is chosen by the congregation at a meeting?
At the church, at the charge, or the all-church meeting.
So people want to, the council would put their name out and...
However you normally do it, yeah. You can do it through a nominations process, where you nominate a slate of officers and then the church affirms that, or...
I mean,
well,
right now, we're starting to meet for nominating because
Yeah.
it's that time we have to have them approved in May
Yeah.
so that they can begin in June. In May, our council meeting will be, formally become a charge conference meeting. You know, it'll be announced, people to come to it, but no.
This was the other handout you had that looks like this. So you've heard me talk about the playing field, right? That you've somehow got to set the policies that lay out the playing field. So if you are doing anything in the church, you know what the boundaries are. You can do anything you want, but stay in the boundaries, right? And so the question we always get is well, what do those boundaries look like? This would be for the church council on what I just shared. So Rick had put this together for our Board of Congregational Development on the conference level. We're trying to live into this as well, and being a policy governance board. So Rick put this together for us on our board level, and he can share this with you on the church level, a document that looks a little different. But as you're talking about developing the playing field, here's what to consider. The work of the leadership board or the church council is one, fiduciary, care and management of the assets, that's funds, human resources, investments. Strategic, making sure there is proper planning to align with the mission and vision. And generatively, proactively planning and guiding the work, in our case it was congregational development, in your case it would be your church, into its future, recognizing the shifting environment of culture. Okay? If you turn it over, the church council purpose, setting and monitoring guiding principles. You see that? Guiding principles, not managing daily tasks and decisions. So the leadership board or your church council would establish the annual budget, Confirm the vision cast by, it says director, but that would be congregation. Okay. Establish yearly and ongoing goals for the ministry. Establish, monitor, and revise as needed the guiding principles. And the guiding principles are really where you get down to the detail of designing the playing field. So when you're talking about guiding principles, there are a set of policies and procedures which allow the ministry to function on a day-to-day basis within healthy boundaries. Guiding principles keep the board from managing, right? So these principles are, on the next page, are permission-giving strategies that protect the overall health and well-being of the ministry. And because our context changes constantly, guiding principles will need to grow and adapt as needed. Okay? So every time a decision is made by the board, ask yourself if there could be a guiding principle established or modified that would have allowed the decision to be made earlier and or without the board's intervention. So that's important to always be asking them. So, you know, if the trustees all of a sudden have to come and get permission to get money to do something, we should ask, after we take care of that, we should ask, now can we design a principle that would enable us not to have to do that next time? But would still keep everything safe and effective, okay? So you don't want to just give them the money without any guiding principles around it. But you want to try to get the board out of as many of those decisions as you possibly can. Church council, in this case. Okay? So the three kind of principles that you would develop are mission principles, boundary principles, and accountability principles. The mission principles would grow out of that all-church meeting, right? So out of the all-church meeting, they should give the church council answer to these questions. What change are we trying to effect? To what extent are we trying to effect change? For whom are we trying to effect change? Okay? This is how are we trying to change lives, change the community. Once those are established, then the church council can establish the boundary principles. Keeping the rules is not the object of the game. Okay? The boundaries tell you how not to play. Right? Do anything you want, but don't go out of bounds. Anything within the rules is fair game. Sometimes the rules can change. Okay, so for example, when we often hire a staff person, we come up with a job description, right? And in the job description, we say, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, right? We give them a list of 6, 8, 10 things that they are responsible for accomplishing. If we were working in this kind of setting up, we would say the role of youth ministry is to make a difference in youth, in the life of youth, by this. And if we do that well, it's going to look like this. You have a budget of this many dollars. You are to help us to reach that outcome. Okay? So you've established, and I'm just trying to come up with a quick example. You've established what? The boundaries of what you're supposed to accomplish, what financial resources you have to do it, and you let them go. Instead of saying you need to have a youth choir, you need to take a youth mission trip, you need to make sure you have a weekly meeting, and you need to make sure you have a Bible study in the schools with the youth, right? That's often what we do. Okay, can you see the shift? How it looks different? I didn't give you a good detailed explanation. I was just trying to come up with something. Okay? That's what we're talking about with the boundary principles. How that works in the lives of people who are leading here. Then the accountability principles. The board is accountable to Christ and those he calls it to serve. The board is accountable to itself for integrity of the process. The director is accountable to the board, achieving fulfillment of mission principles, avoiding violation of boundary principles. So on the conference level, I'm the director, so that the way that the board holds me accountable is that I'm helping us achieve our mission principles, and I'm not going outside the boundaries. So the way the church council would hold the pastor accountable is how? Is the pastor helping us reach our mission principles? Is the pastor taking us outside of the boundaries? Not how many people they visit, not how many Bible studies they lead, not how many sermons they preach, right? Those are counting output, not measuring the outcome. Okay? So that's the shift that would happen. And then the pastor would do the same for the ministry team leaders. And the pastor would say, worship team, how are you helping us live our mission principles? Have you gone out of bounds? Right? Those are the two things you're looking at. Okay, so that's how that accountability piece fits in there. That's all of it, right? Questions on that? This is a lot of stuff, I know. A lot to take in.
When are these guidelines set? I mean, who's going to be doing it and what?
So there are different levels, but the guidelines are worked on. So here is the outcome, right? The difference that you're called to make. And you're over here, you're going to start here. And along the way, what you develop are these goals these goals that tell you if you're working towards that outcome or not, right? And on the path, you put these little stepping stones, which are the action steps you're going to take to get to each of these goals. So if for some reason you take these action steps and you don't hit this goal, then you're off track. So you need to evaluate and you need to adapt and say, what do we need to do to get back on track so we can hit this goal? Because if we don't hit this goal, we're not going to hit this goal, are we? And we're not going to hit that one, and we're certainly not going to get here. So you adapt. And so that's what you're doing the whole way, is you're taking these little steps that you've decided you need to take to get to your goals, and you're evaluating and adjusting along the way. And that's what those 4 meetings, asking those questions allows you to do that. So something may happen in the community, which will take you off the path, and you've got to say, how do we adjust, get back on the path to get to this ultimate difference that we're going to make. Okay, so those are developed throughout, and that's why you may need town hall meetings, you may need listening groups, focus groups to help hear what people are saying so you can determine if you're on the right path, if you're still on the path or not, or if you've strayed off the path at some point. Yes?
So typically at an all-church meeting, the church decides on one goal that they work towards, or would you pick many goals?
I think what the church would do is work on this. What are the major outcomes, the difference that we want to make in our community in the next year? And it may be 3 or 4 statements. It may be 2. It could depend on what you've discerned together.
And do people, let's say the church came up with 5 things they wanted to do. Would a typical church vote and say what are our most important ones, or would they try to do
Well,
everything?
I don't know that you would vote on the outcomes as you would vote on maybe the resources that need to be allotted to do those outcomes. I think people are going to have to trust that as you are meeting throughout the year, as you're doing prayer, as you're doing study, and as you are asking questions, that this group has got a good handle on where we should be going. But what we need the permission on is how can we use our resources to get there. That's people and money and things like that. You were going to say something?
Yeah, and not to disagree with that because I'm smarter than to disagree with you. But I would say at the all church meeting, if it's like a visioning day meeting, normally at the conclusion of that, there's between 3 or 5 goals that have just presented themselves and they are the top 3 to 5 favorites of everyone who is there of where the church could be headed. It doesn't mean we don't do other things.
people that signed up because they have an interest and passion in this area. Create a facilities team who have a passion for helping this building be a welcoming facility for ministry. And then as the trustees are identifying, the whole council's trustees are identifying, pastor then works with the facilities team to get the work done. I mean, there are ways, if you're committed to this, right? If you're committed to this vision, you can work the logistics out. I mean, I think you can
That's
be
all it is,
creative.
logistics, that's all.
Go ahead.
When you look at the staff, the list of staff, like worship, education.
Yeah, there's probably more than that.
Oh,
There's just
way more.
Right, and the pastor would work with just one person from each of those is small. But like when we have our worship team, we bounce a lot of ideas off each other. We would still need that, education would too. So they would still continue to have meetings.
So there's, some of that can be worked out as you figure out, again, as Rick said, you adapt, not just adopt. So how you adapt to some of that, yeah, you would have to work out. So does the pastor work with the worship team leader who then meets with the team that bounces ideas off? Or does the pastor meet with the whole team? That's something you all would have to work out together.
So, okay, can I make a comment? So I think where we struggle in the church is, one, we know we have issues with people volunteering to be part of committees and or these teams. And if you're on those, you are doing 2 meetings a month because you're coming to church council and you're going to your respective committee. And that's where we're struggling to have people involved in that way in the church. So personally, I'm with Dan on this, and that I think we got to figure out a way to get here so that we're not burning our own members out by having them come to 2 meetings every month, and putting a structure in place that allows us to do these things that we're talking about.
I'm in 4 meetings every month.
As hard as it's gonna be to change, because I see where everybody's mindset's at, and I'm kind of there too. Gosh, we've always done this, but we're gonna have to think somewhat creatively. But I think you could do it. It'll free up people's time, and again, it'll free up people to maybe do some other things within the church that they don't do now because they're in meetings twice a month or more.
Or the church, or engage in ministry in the community that
Right.
they can't do because and again, this is what you shared with me. You already have. I mean, there is flexibility. That's a great thing about thinking this way. Once you establish that policy governance mode of thinking, then there's flexibility about how you organize yourself to get the things done that you need to get done. These are required by the Book of Discipline, right? These 4 entities have to be named somehow. Now, the easiest way to help you is to make that all the same people. Well, you can go up to 12. I wouldn't get much bigger than that. But so that's why that's the only thing that's not really flexible is those 4. But anything else, you can make it work. How will best fit you and where you are going together. But you got to figure out where you're going so you know how you can make it work. Also, in your discipleship process, as you're doing discipleship process and people get to a certain point in that process, who's having a conversation with them to see where they think they might be called in ministry or what they think they may be called to do. As opposed to what I used to do in churches is we would always pull out the directory and say, well, they haven't been on a committee in a while, or they haven't done it, and we give them a call, right? And we say, we make it the least amount of commitment possible, right? Well, they only meet 3 times a year, but if you make 1 meeting, that'd be great, right? That's really twisted people's arms. But if you can find that place where they really feel that God has created them for this purpose, then they will do it, and they will do it for a long time. How many of you? Maybe there's somebody in this church that has taught Sunday school for 40 or 50 years. Right? Why is that? Because at some point they felt that this is what God had created them to do, and they could not imagine living life without doing it. Right? And that's why you've got to be, that discipleship process has to be working well, so you are growing the servants who can do the ministry that you need to do to live into the vision and reach the outcome. jobs that you have for yourself?
I think what we have to be careful of is, we jumped into the HCI thing, thinking it would be easy, and it's really bogged down, because it takes a radical change in our culture, and we're struggling with that. And that's why I asked the question is, I love this idea, but it's again a fairly radical change in our culture, and we're a little bit resistant to changing our culture.
Everybody is at some point, yeah. And maybe this isn't where you need to move this moment. You know, you've got the information now as you're continuing to think and to grow and to pray. You know, maybe you say this will work much better for us in a year from now, or whatever. But you know, the key is that you have the information, you're learning about it, and you can decide when it'll best work for you. Because the churches that I know that have jumped into it and they've not done it well, it's made things worse. If that makes sense. Than if they would have really just lived where they are for a while, got a better hold of who they are and what they're trying to accomplish, and then lived into it, would have probably worked out better for them. But because, you know, I get a call, you know, most churches do their leaders from January to December. I know you guys do June to June. But so I'll get a lot of calls from pastors who in late August are saying, hey, can you tell me how to do the single board model for our nominations this fall? And I tell them, no, I can't, because I'm not going to give you that information, because it's just, you can't make that kind of change that quickly. You've got to be really willing to commit not a long time, but you really live into this for 12 months, 24 months, to see how it works for you, and ready to be able to do it. So on the conference level, as a board, we've been working at it, and we're just now beginning to tip into what it could really look like. But we've been working at it for a while here, at least a year, maybe.
And I think too, there's an element
send to Nick electronic copies of things.
Thank you.
So you'll have a PowerPoint and the handouts I gave you